on this day where we honor Canada Day, and not particularly naming it as a birthday, because we need to be very cognizant of the thousands and thousands of years of history of the first peoples here on this land, and the gracious welcome that continues, I pray, to building and populating this country. And so we think of what it is to be Canadian, and the vastness that is our land, and from sea to sea to sea. I want to thank Sue and Joyce and Robin for being the people who prepared and led worship last Sunday. In my absence, I had family time to be traveling a bit to Cappan, south of Oyen, to preside at an extended family member's graveside service, and then on Tuesday to Edmonton for Bob's medical appointment. So it's good to have that flexibility and shared leadership. We will soon be moving into the summer holiday time, but we will continue to offer video worship throughout the summer, and keep everyone abreast of any changes to the someday of in-person gatherings. So let us turn to light candles on this last Sunday in the Indigenous History Month. We again light the directional candles, sending our prayers and good thoughts to the east, the south, to the west, to the north, as we also gather in Christ this day. So while muted, and for those of us here in person, we will respond in the bold print throughout the service. If you are curious and have come to see, if you are weary and have come to rest, if you are grateful and have come to give thanks, if you are hurting and have come for solace, if you are listening and have come to pray, if you are seeking and have come for answers, welcome to worship. Welcome to Canada. So let us bring to mind the many reasons people move within and have immigrated to Canada. Those reasons of wanting a new change or a response that they weren't finding or able to have in their first place of living. We are diverse peoples in Canada, the First Nations having been here for millennia, and French people here since the early 1600s, Black people shortly thereafter, British people arriving in Canada in the early 1700s, the Chinese people late in the 1700s. Our diasporic Canadian communities come from many different places and spaces, from all corners of the world. Let us affirm this diverse heritage with joy. One God, creator of many peoples. And I have a listening song, a anthem that, yes, I put this graphic as a segue before the anthem. We Are Standing on Holy Ground was written by Judy Pearson and Mark Hafso, and we knew Judy as a choir member and director with us in Camrose Community Choir when we lived in Killam years ago. They also gave of their music ministry in leadership at Naramata Center many times. So I was glad to find this This anthem, we are standing on holy ground, and you're welcome in our muted fashions, apart but together, to join in the chorus each time.
We are standing on holy ground. We are standing on holy ground. God has called, we are journey bound, standing on holy ground. In God's presence we gather together, and given the challenge to grow, we open our hearts as we worship and we work to find where God wants us to go. We are standing on holy ground. We are standing holy ground. God has called us. We are journey bound, standing on holy ground. We remember Christ's journey for us, and we need not fear the unknown. For God, He is our guide from beginning to the end. Our journey is never alone, never alone. We are standing on holy ground. We are standing
So let us join in these words of prayer together, a unison prayer called Canada Day Hope, written by Reverend Catherine Somerville. The world's people are made in the image of God, and the world is made beautiful by its rich diversity. We hear the call to live in the world with strong faith and daring hope. As people seeking to walk in ways that bring life, may we learn to see God's image in the faces of all our neighbors. May we learn to live in ways that bring honor and acceptance to the values and cultures that form the fabric of this country. Let us gather in the shelter of our prayer that peace may prevail and harmony and unity will shower our lives with abundant blessing. May all be one in this hope. Amen. This interesting story from 2 Kings 4:8-17. The Shunammite woman offers generous hospitality to the prophet with no thought for reward. Even so, she and her elderly husband are given a child to support them in their old age. One day, when Elisha was passing through Shunem, a wealthy woman urged him to stop and have a meal with her. Whenever he came that way again, he would always eat with her. The woman said to her husband, "This man who regularly passes our way is surely a holy person. Let us make room for him on the roof with a bed, a table, a chair, and a lamp, so he will have a place to stay whenever he comes again." One day when Elisha was in the area, he went up to his room to rest. Suddenly he said to his servant Gehazi, an interpreter, "Call the Shunammite woman." She came and stood before him, and Elisha said to Gehazi, "Say to her, you have taken such trouble and have done so much for us. What then can we do for you? Should we speak a word on your behalf to the king or the chief of the army?" She answered, "I live among my people." Elisha said, "What then may we do for her?" Gehazi answered, "She has no son, and her husband is getting old." "Come here," said Elisha, for she stood at the door. Then he told the Shunammite woman, "This time next year, this very season, you will hold a son in your arms." She replied, "My Lord, O Holy One of God, do not deceive your servant." Well, the woman conceived and gave birth to a son at that time the following year, just as Elisha had said. Gave birth to hope. Very similarly to the story of Abraham and Sarah. And then together we will offer this reading from Matthew chapter 10, the final portion being our gospel focus for today. Jesus gathered the disciples together. Jesus wanted to tell them important things. Jesus was sending the disciples out to tell the good news to everyone, everywhere. Jesus warned them that not everyone would want to listen, and some people would not welcome them. But some people would be glad to hear. Some people would welcome them in Jesus' name. Here is what Jesus said: "Whoever welcomes you welcomes me, And whoever welcomes me welcomes the one who sent me. Whoever welcomes God's messenger, because they are God's messenger, will share in my reward. Whoever welcomes a righteous person, because they are good, will receive the reward of the righteous. And whoever gives even a cup of cold water to one of these little ones in the name of a disciple, truly I tell you, none of these will lose their reward. And I may have mentioned to some of you that a couple of weeks ago, I was on a Zoom gathering of United Church musicians, and they told stories of the hymns that they'd written, these particular hymns, just one focus for each composer. And this one by David Kai, he mentioned, was composed for a wedding that he was asked to preside at, and it came to him to honor this couple that were being married, as he then used the words from the book of Ruth, I will go wherever you go. And for me, this tune is in more voices, but we just haven't used it really. But it became a real earworm for me the last couple of weeks. And I also thought it was wonderful that David is one of the people we've been listening to perhaps a bit more attentively in the United Church as one of our colleagues from the Black, Indigenous, and people of color colleagues. And so this wonderful story about Ruth the Moabite that we touch on once in a while in worship, and especially in women's groups. The Bible is clear at one point, oh, the Moabites are bad. They're not to be allowed to dwell with God's people. That's back in Deuteronomy. But then along comes this wonderful story of Ruth and Naomi, Ruth the Moabite, who challenges the prejudice against Moabites. So I think the Bible itself teaches us of the evolution of faith, understanding of being the people of God. So let's listen to this version sung by David's daughter.
For I would be faithful.
Wherever you may go. Well, as soon as I sort of played with that in my head, wherever you may go, I thought of back to mid-March when all seemed like all I was hearing from people was the cancellation of travel plans or the hurried new arrangements about returning from travel to be back at home in the preventative measures that were coming into our vocabulary, our country, our knowledge at the time. So I thought, well, today we'd have to just travel in our minds as we think about the things that are true of our relationship in the breadth and depth of this country. And as Canada Day approaches, we could do some armchair traveling. Um, it's only been the last 6-7 years with our kids living in Newfoundland that we've learned the what are you at or where you to. And we can play with that. And in a few minutes we will be singing along with the Canadian version of This Land Is Your Land, This Land Is My Land, It's Ours. So we can heartily sing and celebrate, and now I can celebrate that I've been to Bonavista Vista and Vancouver Island. I just haven't been to the Arctic Circle, however. And just last Sunday, as I mentioned, I was out east, almost to the Saskatchewan border, to the place my mom called home as a child through to early adulthood, and always called God's country. It was home for her. And her parents had journeyed there from eastern Canada and midwestern United States, and their parents before them from the UK. And my other grandparents, and just think of all the traveling that populated the settler community. Bob's grandpa, Richardson, I find quite the interesting story. Only 17 years old and sent from Nottingham, England, all alone to Content. We see Content Bridge as such a blip on our east central Alberta map, but at the time it was quite the community, Métis community and settler community, and he barely knew to whom he was supposed to be greeted as family, and they were not good family. They saw him as a good, hearty laborer and not exactly a family member. But that was his beginning in Canada. He was told he needed to go and find some dry climate, some fresh air, because of the coal pollution in Nottingham, lest he succumb to the fragility of the health of his lungs. And then I thought of our friend Reverend Hart Cantillon. Years ago, ministry was shared between him and his son Bill here, and he also was prominent through his virtual ministry in the radio shows of the day. And he talked about growing up Cree, his father an Indian farm instructor at Goodfish Lake, and the gracious hospitality and welcome they received there as settler people. And his mother, Della Young, had been a teacher at the Red Deer Indian Industrial School, and he had then learned and knew all too well as he grew to adulthood of the Canadian policies of assimilation that were put upon the very people who'd extended hospitality to his family when he was young, and to many other settlers. Particularly, he would cause us to remember by helping to try and nourish and heal those who were suffering from the pandemic a century ago in 1918 to 20. Um, for the past couple weeks, we have been focusing on these gospel passages from the book of Matthew, chapters 9 and 10, where the disciples are sent on mission. They are commissioned, common mission. Their mission to be common with that of what they had been taught and seen in Jesus. So they were given further instructions as those who were sent, as messengers, as ambassadors. As God had sent Jesus, so Jesus sent them. And the cultural context of the day would be to indeed welcome the forerunner or the one sent as a messenger of a prominent person. You came and you stood for all the relationship ties you had with who had sent you. As we prepare for Bob's Auntie Ethel Williams' 100th birthday, we've received these various certificates. What's that word? Congratulatory um, words from everyone. And I was talking to Carol yesterday, and she said, but not directly from the Queen. And I said, no, the thing is, the Lieutenant Governor is the Queen's representative. So we are to be mindful of this representation, and it is part of our very faith that we offer the face of discipleship today as well. So in our context, whoever welcomes you welcomes me is then a necessary corrective in our very individualistic and independent society and way of thinking. We have a hard time remembering that we are a tribe, we are a people, instead of how individual we are. And since Jesus stood for and was bonded with the least, the marginalized, the last, then if we welcome Jesus into our lives, we need to be the ones extending hospitality in very concrete ways and receiving hospitality in very concrete ways. Cups of cold water, real responses for real thirsts and real needs. Receiving as much as, or importantly, is really held up here, and yet it's hard for us to receive because we are used to being strong and independent. But we are the ones representing Jesus. We are the ones representing our people. I was asked when I went to the anti-racism rallies, was my church okay with my being there? And I said, well, my church, especially as in a rural community, I know, they know that I take the face of the church with me wherever I go, and most times I'm complimented for being out and about and being visible in the community. And so I said, if somebody wants to say differently at one occasion over the other, well, then they need to be talking to me and or the board. So I try to be very mindful of that, and I'm very grateful for the respect that is offered in that role. And I chose that song about holy ground because it is such holy ground when you are welcomed into people's lives and homes on these various transition times and whatever's going on for folks. Hospitality is a way of living that looks beyond the self, opens the inner doors wide, and says with a glad heart, "Welcome, come in." When have you received hospitality, welcome, and a generous openness? I hope it's very true in each of our lives that we can think of times where we've needed such a welcome. I have an illustration from a friend of mine from Killam, Carrie Fox Newby. She was upset and wanted to therefore do something with how she was feeling of hearing about the angst of Western separation and the angst of the transfer payment program not being fair. And she said, "Can you pause and think, please, fellow Albertans, about whenever you have had the experience?" And she said she and her husband had the wonderful opportunity to travel across Canada and experience the great country. And just a few years back, in the midst of the Fort McMurray fires. And because they were Albertans, they had Alberta license plate. She was always impressed by how many people said to them, "Oh my goodness, you're from Alberta. Do you know anybody in Fort McMurray?" And indeed, Mark worked there. And so she said it was awesome to feel so welcome and to be so um, graciously catered to with their poor French in Quebec. And she said it gave her pause to think, what's wrong with us thinking it was so hard to abide French class instead of actually learn it and as a language. Um, why should we have to complain about understanding someone's accent? The friendliness of the Maritimers, she says, is unmatched in any part of Canada. They will welcome you into their home and feed you supper. And then, as she says, even in our case, when the buddy that your husband met in Alberta in the oil patch then got called in for a last minute shift at a fish plant, so his poor wife, who didn't know you from Adam or Eve, is left at home with the kids to greet you hospitably. So many miles, so much beauty to call our own, so many friendly people. So these are the kinds of stories, the real true experiences of hospitality and welcome that is Canada, that we bring to mind this day. And then on Tuesday, we were welcomed when we were visiting in Edmonton. On the spur of the moment, we had time to visit a friend who we got to know as a neighbor 40 years ago. And Jacqueline and Jackie now live in Riverbend in Edmonton, and they are participants, strong participants at Southminster Steiner United Church, and have been on refugee committee for years. And because Southminster Steiner United Church is an affirming ministry, welcoming and inclusive, in particular of LGBTQ2+, they have, as members of the refugee committee, also been very outspoken and welcoming in selecting to support refugees that are threatened and mistreated in their home countries because of their sexual identity or gender. And so most recently in 2018, they welcomed Fuad from Turkey. And I loved in this write-up that she then pointed me towards. It was the write-up of their refugee committee work for their annual report at Southminster Steiner. And they talk about how they received Fuad to the Edmonton Airport July 8th, 2018. Still in the rush of Canada Day celebrations, so to speak, and that they slowly introduced him to many in their church community and in the Edmonton community. And he said to them early on that he was grateful to be in Canada, he felt safe here, and he was also thankful to have the time to find his way around this small town. This small town being true in his perspective because Istanbul had 23 million people in Istanbul, let alone considering Edmonton. So perspective, of course, is always a part of our yielding to being a people, not individuals, as if we had the whole truth and nothing but the truth. He's outgoing, he made connections, and he found work, and he said his real true hope was to become an interpreter and a teacher of English language for others. He was so grateful of having begun his studies in English before he came, and then having time to learn more. He said, I'm happy to come to Canada, although it's not easy beginning to adjust and settle down, but I do feel privileged and grateful. And so that's just, again, just a sampling of all the good news that can be part of what we think of. The woman I met from Lacombe through the anti-racism actions, Julita, who calls Lacombe St. Andrew's United Church a home church for her, again, is a refugee, but she said, I am Black, I am of African descent, but it's not the only story of my people to say we have come from slavery to freedom. She said, we actually can trace our roots in her genealogy to nobility and kings and queens and princes and princesses. Thank you very much. And so I just love her way of being so keen to help us learn. The practice of our faith is to create within us the habit of hospitality, says George Hermanson, to treat this world and others as siblings, no more than that, unless it be friends. The mission of the church is to ingrain in us habits of the heart, love to share in large and little ways. We know love has come to town. We welcome it in our living when we extend ourselves to reach out, open our eyes to the needs around us, and live in response. For we have been seen and welcomed and named, and now we welcome, in doing so, God who is known more fully. These verses from Matthew report the serious family consequences of the choice to join the Jesus group. Remember, I mentioned a couple weeks ago, we join the church as surrogate family, remembering that we are called to this larger living. And so in sending them literally away from their family, Jesus was saying the assistance that one might expect as compensation for the loss of family ties will be experienced through the hospitality of those who welcome you. For we are all of one race, the human race. So our next is then to follow what I mentioned about Southminster Steiner, our local Edmonton church sponsoring specific refugees. And this is a wider story as a minute for mission.
I'm Raymond Bryan, though I prefer to be called Nature. I work with Nature Network in Nairobi. It's a transgender-led organization for LGBTI Ugandans, those with talents. We do music, dance, and drama. We do vlogs. We do audio radio. We do psychosocial supports. We sensitize people on HIV, human rights.
If I go to our close friends and tell them that Raymond is HIV positive, have I gone wrong?
You're doing more harm than good.
My name is Solomon Gishira. I'm the acting General Secretary of Pembiza Christian Council. Pembizo Christian Council is the council for African Christians living in the margin. We have so many people who are within the Christian fraternity, but they don't feel that they are within the mainstream. It's like they are living in the peripheries. And Pembizo actually comes from the Swahili word of pembezoni, which means at the edges.
When talking about Pembizo, oh my God, it has done so much, because it was the first organization in Kenya where I myself got a chance to get psychosocial support after the anti-homosexuality bill was passed in Uganda. Many people faced a lot of insecurities. Many people were threatened to be killed.
So here is where we come up with a safe house as a place of hold for people to find refuge.
So far we are 16 members in the house.
These people arrive in those safe houses when they are shaken, traumatized by the experiences that they've had. And so we try to look for professional counselors who are also affirming. Through the safe house, they find colleagues there who are embracing and who have been through similar situations, and they can share their experiences, and gradually there is healing.
We welcome to the Nature Network. Many people came into our inboxes and they were like, oh my God, we really did an interesting topic, which was about PrEP. And today we are back with the counselor. Could you please say hi to the viewers, our counselor,
Hi, the viewers
and the listeners too?
The viewers and the listeners of Nature Network, we are back again.
People are coming to our inbox telling us, because of your network, I'm changed. Even if he's gay, but he can do radio. Even if he's gay, he can sensitize the community. And for me, I feel so good when I get to change one person's perspective.
The very seed capital for Pembizo to start its operations came from the United Church of Canada. The support comes to support the safe house, the psychosocial support. We see the role of United Church of Canada in Pembizo's work as the mustard seed that germinates to an overwhelming tree. And here is the ministry of Christ planted in a very small way.
Your contributions to the Mission and Service Fund of the United Church of Canada help make programs like this possible. Thank you, and please continue to give.
So that's when our virtual worship turns into a virtual exercise class. Whoa. Wow, eh? Yeah. Bob says he'll do the rhythm, somebody else will do the backflip. So in our separateness, we again come to this time of bridging through prayer. Wonderfully thankful for so many gifts and generosities, and then also acknowledging our pains and problems and those which we willingly take to heart on behalf of others as well, uplifting in our minds, in our hearts, to be with God today in prayer. I'm using these words that were written in our Seasons of the Spirit curriculum. God of those who feel welcome and those who feel shut out, help those who feel aware of your love. Reach out to those who do not, so that all can be moved to feel received, O God, at the heart of your being. God of those who are rejoicing and those who are mourning. Help those who are filled with joy. Reach out to those who are filled with sorrow, so that all feel comforted. Move us to show your care, O God. God of those who are safe and those who are in danger. Help those who are secure. Reach out to those who are in peril, so that all feel protected. Move us to care, O God. Many have borne pain, body, mind, and spirit, sorrow in their hearts. Many have felt abandoned or attacked. We cry to you, O God, for help, for ourselves, for our neighbors, for our country, for all. Move us. Share with us and through us care and compassion, O God, as we gather to pray as Jesus taught this day, saying again, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. And this is our sing-along time. I hope it comes through. The pictures should take us to many places as we think of this land.
This land is your land, this land is my land. From Buena Vista to the Vancouver Island, from the Arctic Circle to the Great Lake waters, this land was made for you and me. As I went walking that living of highway, I saw above me that endless skyway. I saw below me that golden valley. This land was made for you and me. This land is your land, this land is my land. From Buena Vista to the Vancouver Island, from the Arctic Circle to the Great Lake water, this land was made for you and me. When the sun came shining and I was strolling, and
I liked how that was done as a grade 12 project, making the video. I had watched the video just the other day of our graduation ceremonies in the football field right by my house, but I was away, so I watched the video. So it's great to see the accomplishments and the commissioning to another part of the journey for our students. So we commission one another this day, saying, "Go, bless and be blessed, love and be loved, renew and be renewed. Go, build community, build Canada, build God's vision of Shalom. We will go with God's blessing for the world." Amen. And there will be, apparently, fireworks for Canada Day in Stettler.